A millionaire was at the airport waiting for his flight when he saw something that completely shocked him. His ex, pregnant, sitting on the floor asking for money. She was wearing old clothes and looked lost. No one seemed to notice her. Until he did. Their eyes met, and for a few seconds, time stood still. What he did next left everyone around speechless. No one could believe it. The harsh fluorescent lights of Denver International Airport cast long shadows across the terminal floor as Sawyer Maddox strode through the busy concourse, his Italian leather briefcase swinging in rhythm with his purposeful steps. Another successful business deal closed, another city conquered. Such was the life he'd built for himself as one of Chicago's most prominent entrepreneurs. At 42, he had everything money could buy. A penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, a fleet of luxury, cars, and a corporate empire that made headlines in the Wall Street Journal. Yet despite the trappings of success, an emptiness lingered in his steel blue eyes, a void that no amount of wealth seemed able to fill. 3 years had passed since that morning when he'd woken up to find her gone. Delaney Harlow, the woman who had turned his world upside down and then vanished without a trace. The memory of her still haunted him. Her infectious laugh, the way her honey-blonde hair caught the morning light, the depth of understanding in her hazel eyes when she looked at him. The announcement of a delayed flight echoed through the terminal, drawing Sawyer's attention back to the present. He checked his Patek Philippe watch. He had 2 hours before his private jet was scheduled to depart. Plenty of time for a coffee and a quick review of the contract he'd just secured. As he navigated through the crowd toward the premium lounge, a commotion near gate B36 caught his attention. At first, it was just background noise, the kind of disturbance seasoned travelers learned to tune out. But then he heard a voice, a familiar cadence that stopped him dead in his tracks. His heart seemed to skip several beats as he turned slowly toward the sound. There, in the midst of a growing crowd of onlookers, stood Delaney. But this wasn't the confident, vibrant woman who had shared his life 3 years ago. This Delaney was disheveled, her face tear-stained, her clothes wrinkled and worn. Most striking of all was her swollen belly, clearly in the late stages of pregnancy. She was moving from person to person, her hands trembling as she appeared. To be asking for something, money perhaps, her voice cracking with desperation. Sawyer stood frozen, his mind refusing to process the scene before him. The woman who had once lit up every room she entered, who had challenged his views on art and life with her quick wit and passionate arguments, was now reduced to begging strangers for help. The contrast was so stark, so wrong, that for a moment he wondered if he was hallucinating, if his guilt and longing had finally manifested into some cruel mirage. But then their eyes met across the crowded terminal, and the world seemed to stop spinning. Recognition flashed across Delaney's face, followed by a complex mix of emotions: shock, fear, relief, and something else, something that looked remarkably like hope. She took a stumbling step backward, one hand protectively cradling her pregnant belly, the other reaching out to steady herself against a nearby pillar. In that moment, as travelers rushed past them like water around rocks in a stream, Sawyer felt the carefully constructed walls of his post-Delaney life begin to crumble. The questions he'd spent 3 years trying to suppress came rushing back with overwhelming force. Why did she leave? What went wrong? And now, seeing her like this, what had happened to the woman he'd never stopped loving? Without conscious thought, his feet began moving toward her. The distance between them seemed both infinite and microscopic, each step carrying the weight of 3 years of unanswered questions. As he drew closer, he could see the dark circles under her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands, the way she seemed to be fighting the urge to flee. "Delaney!" His voice came out barely above a whisper, but she flinched as if he'd shouted. The noise of the airport faded away, leaving only the sound of his pounding heart and her shaky breathing. Time seemed to stand still as they faced each Other two people who had once shared everything, now separated by years of silence and secrets. The moment stretched between them like a thread about to snap, charged with unspoken words and buried emotions. And in the fluorescent glare of the airport terminal, Sawyer Maddox realized that his life was about to change forever, again. "Please," Delaney whispered, her voice hoarse and unfamiliar. I can't be seen here." Her eyes darted nervously around the terminal, scanning faces in the crowd as if searching for hidden threats. The confident art gallery owner Sawyer had known was gone, replaced by someone who seemed to carry the weight of countless sleepless nights. Without hesitation, Sawyer shrugged off his expensive suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders, shielding her from curious onlookers. The familiar scent of his cologne seemed to momentarily steady her, and he watched as her fingers clutched. The fabric like a lifeline. Using his considerable influence, he quickly secured a private room in the airport's first-class lounge, guiding her away from the public eye. Once inside, Delaney collapsed into a plush armchair, her pregnancy making the movement awkward and uncertain. Sawyer ordered water and tea, fighting the urge to bombard her with questions. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken words, broken only by the muffled sounds of airport announcements filtering through the door. "I never thought I'd see you again," she finally said, her fingers tracing patterns on the glass of water before her. "I convinced myself it was better that you'd moved on, forgotten about me." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "But here you are, looking exactly the same, while I'm—" She gestured vaguely at herself, shame coloring her features. Sawyer leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. 3 years, Delaney. 3 years of wondering what I did wrong, what I could have done differently. You disappeared without a word, without a trace. I hired private investigators. I called every hospital in Chicago. I thought—" His voice cracked slightly. "I thought something terrible had happened to you." Tears welled up in Delaney's eyes. "Something terrible did happen," she whispered, "but not what you think. My mother, Marcella, she—" Her hands began to shake so violently that water sloshed over the rim of her glass. Sawyer knew of Marcella, Arlo by reputation, a former judge known for her iron will and extensive connections. He'd only met her twice during his relationship with Delaney, but he remembered the calculating look in her eyes, the way she'd seemed to measure his worth beyond mere dollars and cents. "She told me you never loved me," Delaney continued, each word seeming to cause her physical pain. "She had proof, emails, messages, recordings of you discussing our relationship like it was just another business transaction. She showed me documents proving you were planning to acquire my gallery, only to sell it off in pieces." Her hand moved protectively over her pregnant belly. "And when I discovered I was pregnant—" The revelation hit Sawyer like a physical blow. Pregnant, back then? His mind raced back, calculating dates, remembering their last weeks together. "But why didn't you tell me?" "Because by then, I believed every lie she'd fed me. The evidence seemed so real, so overwhelming. She convinced me you'd use the child to destroy me, to take everything I'd built." Delaney's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "So I ran. I ran as far as I could, changed my name, tried to build a new life. But now—" The tears she'd been holding back finally spilled over. "Now she's found me again. And this time she's threatened to take my baby. My gallery is gone, my savings are depleted, and I have nowhere left to run. I was trying to gather enough money for a bus ticket when you found me." Sawyer felt a cold fury building inside him, not at Delaney, but at the elaborate web of lies that had torn them apart. Every instinct told him she was telling the truth. The devastation in her eyes was too raw, too real to be fabricated. And suddenly, the past 3 years took on a different shape. Not a story of abandonment, but of manipulation and fear. Rising from his chair, Sawyer moved to kneel before her, taking her trembling hands in his. Listen to me, he said, his voice firm but gentle. Whatever evidence Marcella showed you was fake. I never planned to take your gallery, I never stopped loving you, and I'm not letting you run away again, not without fighting back. In that moment, as their eyes met, something shifted between them, a spark of the trust they'd once shared, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. But neither of them could have known just how far Marcella would go to maintain her control, or what sacrifices lay ahead in their fight for truth and redemption. One phone call was all it took to redirect Sawyer's private jet from Chicago to Charleston. As he guided Delaney through the private terminal, her hand gripping his arm with nervous energy, he was already formulating a plan. His other hand pressed his phone to his ear, the familiar voice of Beckett Dwyer, his best friend and legal counsel, on the line. I need you to clear my schedule for the next week, Sawyer said, his tone leaving no room for argument. And, Beck, I need you to look into Judge Marcella Harlow, everything you can find, cases, connections, financial records, especially anything from 3 years ago. Delaney tensed beside him at the mention of her mother's name, but Sawyer gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of amber as they boarded the jet, its interior a cocoon of soft leather and subdued lighting. It was a stark contrast to the desperate scene in the Denver airport just hours before. You didn't have to do this, Delaney murmured as she settled into one of the plush seats. I don't want to drag you into my mess. Sawyer studied her face in the warm cabin light. Despite her exhaustion, despite the fear that still lingered in her eyes, he could see traces of the woman who had once challenged him to see the world differently. The woman who had made him question whether success could be measured in more than just dollar signs and market shares. This became my mess 3 years ago, he replied, his voice soft but determined. I just didn't know it then. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Tell me about the pregnancy, the first one. Delaney's hand unconsciously moved to her stomach, a gesture that now carried double meaning. I lost it, she whispered, pain etching deep lines around her mouth. 2 months after I left, the stress, the fear, my body couldn't. She took a shuddering breath. Mother said it was for the best, that it proved I wasn't ready to be a mother. That's when I finally started to question her, but by then I was trapped in her web of control. The flight attendant appeared with herbal tea for Delaney and coffee for Sawyer, providing a momentary respite from the heavy conversation. As they climbed to cruising altitude, Delaney gradually revealed more details of the past 3 years. How Marcella had isolated her in a small town outside Charleston. How she'd controlled every aspect of her daughter's life through a combination of emotional manipulation and financial dependency. But something changed recently, Sawyer prompted, gently, noting how Delaney's hands kept returning to her pregnant belly. I met someone, an elderly woman named Grace, who ran the local art supply store. She became like a grandmother to me, encouraged me to start painting again. A ghost of a smile crossed Delaney's face. She was the first person who made me feel real again. When she passed away 2 months ago, she left me a letter. It contained news clippings about you from the past 3 years. Sawyer leaned forward, intrigued. What kind of news clippings? Articles about your charitable work, about the art foundation you established in Chicago, the same foundation Mother had told me you'd abandoned. Delaney's voice grew stronger. That's when I started digging, started questioning everything she'd told me. When I discovered I was pregnant again, I knew I had to get away before she could control this child's life too. His phone buzzed with a message from Beckett. Found something interesting. Meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m., Charleston Place Hotel. Bring her. Sawyer showed Delaney the message, watching as anxiety and hope warred on her face. We don't have to do this, he assured her. We can go anywhere you want. Start fresh. She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers absently tracing patterns on the armrest. Finally, she looked up at him, and for the first time since their reunion, he saw a flash of the old Delaney, the woman who had once fearlessly pursued truth through her art. "No," she said firmly. "I'm tired of running, tired of letting her control my life through fear. This baby deserves better than that. We all do." As the jet cruised through the darkening sky, Sawyer watched Delaney finally drift into an exhausted sleep. He pulled a blanket over her shoulders, his mind racing with possibilities and plans. Whatever evidence Beckett had found, whatever battles lay ahead, one thing was certain: he wouldn't let Marcella Harlow destroy their lives a second time. But in the depths of his determination, a small voice of caution whispered through his mind. Marcella hadn't maintained her power and influence for decades by being careless. If they were going to fight her, they needed to be prepared for the storm that was surely coming. The Charleston Place Hotel's private conference room felt worlds away from the chaos of yesterday's airport encounter. Beckett Dwyer's tall frame was bent over a laptop, his usual immaculate appearance slightly disheveled, a clear sign he'd spent the night diving deep into research. As Sawyer and Delaney entered, he looked up, his dark eyes widening slightly at Delaney's condition. "I'd say, good to see you again, but given the circumstances." Beckett adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, a habit Sawyer recognized as a sign of agitation. "What I've found? Well, you'd better sit down." Delaney lowered herself carefully into one of the leather chairs, while Sawyer remained standing, his hand resting protectively on the back of her seat. Morning light filtered through the room's tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished conference table. 3 years ago, Beckett began, turning his laptop screen toward them. A series of very specific financial transactions occurred through a network of shell companies. All of them can be traced back to one source, Marcella Harlow. He pulled up a complex web of documentation. She didn't just manipulate emotions, she orchestrated an entire financial conspiracy. Delaney leaned forward, her face pale. "What kind of conspiracy?" "She systematically destroyed your gallery's reputation in the art world. Anonymous tips to critics about fraudulent pieces, whispered rumors about financial instability." Beckett's fingers flew across the keyboard, bringing up more documents. But here's where it gets interesting. She simultaneously had her associates approach your artists, offering them better deals elsewhere. Within months, your gallery was hemorrhaging both reputation and talent. Sawyer's grip on the chair tightened. "That's why she seemed so concerned about my business interest in the gallery. She was creating a situation where I would appear to be taking advantage of its vulnerability." "Exactly." Beckett pulled out a thick folder. "But the real smoking gun is this: a series of forged emails and doctored recordings. Professional work, extremely convincing. She hired the best in the business to create a digital trail that would make Sawyer appear manipulative and calculating." With trembling hands, Delaney reached for the documents. Her eyes scanned the fabricated correspondence, taking in conversations that had never happened, plans that had never existed. These dates, they aligned perfectly with when she started showing me evidence of Sawyer's supposed betrayal. But why? Sawyer finally sat down, his mind racing. Why go to such elaborate lengths? Beckett's expression grew grim. Control, pure and simple. According to my sources, Marcella has a pattern. This isn't the first time she's intervened in her daughter's life this way. I found records of similar incidents with Delaney's college, boyfriend, and her first job opportunity in New York. Each time, Marcella orchestrated events to maintain her influence over Delaney's life. The pregnancy must have terrified her, Delaney whispered, realization dawning in her eyes. A baby would have given me a family of my own, a source of love and purpose outside her control. She never expected us to discover the truth, Sawyer. added, the pieces falling into place. That's why she's panicking now, threatening to take custody of your baby. She's losing her grip on you. Beckett nodded, pulling out one final document. And this is her weakness. In her rush to maintain control, she got sloppy. One of the shell companies she used links directly to her personal accounts. It's a clear, paper trail of fraud and manipulation. Hope flickered across Delaney's face, but it was quickly replaced by fear. You don't know my mother. She won't stop. Even with evidence against her, she has connections everywhere. Judges, lawyers, child services. She'll use everything at her disposal. Then we'll be ready. Sawyer's voice was steel. Beckett, I want you to prepare the strongest legal case possible. Double your usual fee. Whatever resources you need, you've got them. Sawyer, no, Delaney protested. You can't risk everything you've built. My mother will come after your business, your reputation. He knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. Listen to me. 3 years ago, I lost you because I didn't know what we were fighting against. Now we know. And this time, I'm not letting her win. The room fell silent, except for the soft hum of Beckett's laptop and the distant sounds of Charleston traffic below. Through the windows, clouds had begun to gather, promising an afternoon storm, a fitting metaphor for the battle that lay ahead. Beckett cleared his throat. There's one more thing you should know. Marcella has already started moving pieces on the board. She filed preliminary custody paperwork this morning. She's not waiting for the baby to be born. She's laying the groundwork. Now. Delaney's hands tightened around Sawyer's. How long do we have? The initial hearing is set for next week. She's expediting everything, using her influence to fast-track the process. Beckett began gathering his documents. We need to move quickly, build our defense before she can spin her narrative to the medium. As if on cue, thunder rumbled in the distance. Sawyer looked at Delaney, seeing both fear and determination in her eyes. They had evidence now, a chance to fight back. But they also had an enemy who'd spent decades accumulating power and influence, who'd stop at nothing to maintain control. The storm was coming. The only question was, would they be strong enough to weather it? The headlines exploded across social media like wildfire. Tech mogul Sawyer Maddox in child custody scandal. Former judge fights to protect unborn grandchild from billionaire's influence. Sources reveal pattern of manipulation in Maddox empire. Each notification that lit up Sawyer's phone felt like another nail in a coffin being built by invisible hands. From their temporary sanctuary in a private suite at Charleston Place Hotel, Sawyer and Delaney watched as Marcella's carefully orchestrated media campaign unfolded. She had chosen her timing perfectly, striking just as the markets opened on Monday morning. Your shares are down 12%, Beckett reported grimly, his eyes fixed on his tablet. The board is calling for an emergency meeting. 3. Major investors have already expressed concerns about the company's stability. Delaney sat by the window, one hand pressed against the glass as rain streaked down the pane. She's doing exactly what I feared, using your own success against you, turning it into something ugly. Her voice caught. Maybe if I hadn't come to you. Don't. Sawyer's tone was gentle but firm as he crossed the room to her. This is exactly what she wants, to make you doubt yourself, doubt us, to make you feel like running is the only option. A soft knock at the door made them all freeze. Beckett checked the security feed on his phone before opening it, revealing a petite woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and kind eyes. Sarah Chen, she announced, extending her hand. I'm the investigative reporter Beckett contacted. Sawyer recognized her name from several high-profile exposés she'd written for the Washington Post. Her presence was both reassuring and terrifying. They were counting on her reputation for uncovering truth to help counter Marcella's narrative. Thank you for coming, Delaney said, her voice stronger than it had been all morning. I know my mother probably tried to prevent this meeting. Sarah's smile was wry. Oh, she did. Rather heavy-handedly, I might add. Which only convinced me there was a real story here. She settled into an armchair, pulling out a recorder. Now, let's talk about the pattern of control that stretches back to your childhood. For the next 2 hours, Delaney spoke more freely than she had since their reunion at the airport. She described growing up under Marcella's influence, the subtle manipulations, the orchestrated coincidences that always seemed to separate her from anyone who got too close. Sarah took notes continuously, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly letting Delaney's story flow naturally. Halfway through the interview, Beckett's phone buzzed. His face darkened as he read the message. We have a problem. Judge, Carlton Harrison has been assigned to the custody case. No, Delaney breathed, her face draining of color. He and my mother have been friends for decades. They vacation together in the Hamptons every summer. It gets worse, Beckett continued. He's expedited the hearing. We now have 3 days, not a week. Sarah looked up from her notebook, her expression thoughtful. Carlton Harrison, wasn't he involved in that controversial family court decision last year? The one where the mother mysteriously lost custody despite overwhelming evidence in her favor? Can you prove any connection? Sawyer asked, his mind already racing through possibilities. Give me 24 hours, Sarah replied, gathering her things. I need to make some calls, check some sources, but if there's a paper trail between Harrison and your mother, I'll find it. As Sarah left, Sawyer's phone rang, the head of his board of directors. He stepped onto the balcony to take the call, the humid Charleston air clinging to his skin. The conversation was brief, but brutal. The board was considering a vote of no confidence if he didn't handle the situation immediately. When he returned, inside, Delaney was standing by his laptop, her face ashen as she read the latest online headlines. A new article had just dropped, claiming to have evidence of financial impropriety in Sawyer's company. Allegations that mysteriously mirrored the fake documentation Marcella had used 3 years ago. She's not just trying to win custody, Delaney realized, her hand protectively cradling her belly. She's trying to destroy you completely, leave you with nothing so you can't fight back. Sawyer wrapped his arms around her from behind, both of them watching as the stock ticker on the screen showed his company's value continuing to plummet. In the reflection of the monitor, he could see Beckett pacing, phone pressed to his ear as he tried to mobilize their legal defense. Let her try, Sawyer murmured, his lips close to Delaney's ear. Some things are worth losing everything for. Thunder crashed outside and the rain intensified, but neither of them moved from their embrace. They had 3 days to prepare for a court battle that seemed increasingly rigged against them. 3 days to counter years of carefully constructed manipulation. 3 days to prove that love could stand against power, truth against influence. The storm had broken just as they'd known it would. Now they had to find the strength to stand in its path, together. The old plantation house on the outskirts of Charleston looked exactly as Grace had described it in her letter. It's white. Columns rose against the evening sky like silent sentinels, while Spanish moss draped the surrounding oak trees in ethereal curtains. As Sawyer helped Delaney up the curved driveway, he could feel her trembling. Are you sure about this? He asked softly. We could wait for Sarah to... No, Delaney interrupted, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. Grace's letter said everything we need is here. She kept records of every conversation, every strange occurrence she witnessed. She knew something wasn't right even before I did. The key was exactly where Grace's letter had indicated, under a loose brick in the garden wall. Inside, the house smelled of old books and furniture polish, preserved exactly as Grace had. Left it 2 months ago. Family photos lined the walls, and in several of them, Sawyer could see a younger Delaney, smiling and paint-splattered, working on canvases in Grace's sunroom. She was the only one who encouraged my art after everything, Delaney explained, running her fingers along a dusty easel. Mother always said art was a hobby, not a career, but Grace saw how it helped me heal. They found Grace's study on the second floor, a cozy room lined with filing cabinets and overflowing bookshelves. A large desk dominated the space, its surface covered in carefully organized stacks of papers. Grace was more than just an art supply store owner, Delaney said as she began opening drawers. She used to be a legal secretary for one of Charleston's biggest firms. She knew how to document everything. As if to prove her point, she pulled out a thick folder labeled MH Incidents. Inside were detailed notes, dates, and observations spanning the past 3 years. Grace had methodically recorded every time Marcella had visited the store, every conversation she'd overheard, every strange coincidence that had affected Delaney's life. Sawyer's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Found something big. Meeting. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. Keep digging on your end. They worked through the night, sorting through Grace's meticulous records. Around midnight, Delaney gasped, pulling out a sealed envelope. "This is Grace's handwriting," she said, breaking the seal with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter dated just days before Grace's death, along with a small USB drive. "My dearest Delaney," she read aloud, her voice catching. "If you're reading this, then my suspicions about your mother have been confirmed. The drive contains security footage from the store. Footage I kept hidden when she tried to have my cameras upgraded last year. Watch it carefully. You'll see the truth about who has been monitoring your every move and why. More importantly, you'll see proof of a conversation between your mother and Judge Harrison that should never have happened." Sawyer quickly connected the drive to his laptop. The footage was grainy but clear enough to show Marcella and Harrison in what they thought was a private corner of Grace's store, discussing how to handle the situation once Delaney's pregnancy was discovered. "We'll need to move quickly," Marcella was saying in the video. "File for emergency custody as soon as the baby is born. With your help, we can paint Sawyer as an unfit influence, a ruthless businessman who'd use the child as leverage. The evidence we planted 3 years ago will support the narrative perfectly." Harrison's response made Sawyer's blood run cold. "And the property transfers we discussed? The offshore accounts? Already arranged. Once this is done, your retirement will be very comfortable indeed." Delaney sank into a nearby chair, one hand pressed to her mouth. "She was planning this for months. She knew I was pregnant before. I even told her. She must have had people watching me." Sawyer knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "But Grace was watching her right back. She gave us exactly what we needed." "Grace knew she was sick," Delaney said softly, looking around the study with new understanding. "She knew she didn't have much time, so she made sure the truth wouldn't die with her." Dawn was breaking by the time they finished going through all of Grace's records. The evidence they'd gathered painted a clear picture of systematic manipulation and judicial corruption. But more than that, it revealed the depth of Grace's love for Delaney, a pure, supportive love that stood in stark contrast to Marcella's toxic control. As they prepared to leave, Delaney paused in Grace's sunroom, where an unfinished canvas still stood on the easel. "I stopped painting when she died," she admitted. "It hurt too much. But now..." She picked up a dried paintbrush, turning it over in her hands. "Now I think I understand what she was trying to teach me. Art isn't just about creating beauty, it's about revealing truth." Sawyer wrapped his arms around her from behind, both of them watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of hope. In less than 48 hours, they would face Marcella and Harrison in court. But now they had more than just evidence on their side. They had Grace's legacy of truth and love supporting them. As they drove back to the hotel, Delaney seemed different, stronger. The woman who had been running in fear was transforming into someone ready to stand and fight. Grace's final gift hadn't just been the evidence they needed, it had been the courage to use it. The conference room at Beckett's Charleston law office had transformed into a war room. Evidence boards covered the walls, timelines stretched across windows, and laptops displayed real-time updates of news coverage and stock prices. Sarah Chen sat in one corner, phone pressed to her ear as she coordinated with her editorial team. Beckett paced the length of the room, rehearsing their legal strategy. But Sawyer's attention was fixed on Delaney, who stood before Grace's evidence boards with quiet intensity. She'd traded her disheveled appearance for a simple but elegant maternity dress, her honey blonde hair swept back in a neat chignon. The fearful woman from the airport had been replaced by someone who radiated quiet determination. "Your board is calling again," Beckett announced, holding out Sawyer's phone. "They're voting tomorrow morning. Marcella's allies have been busy. They've convinced half the members that removing you is the only way to save the company's stock price." Sawyer took the phone but didn't answer it. "Let them vote. The company doesn't matter now." Sawyer. Delaney turned from the evidence board, her face troubled. "You can't just throw away everything you've built. There has to be another way." "Actually," Sarah interrupted, hanging up her phone with a satisfied smile, "there might be. My team just confirmed something interesting about Judge Harrison's financial records. Regular deposits to a Cayman Islands account starting exactly 3 years ago, right when he helped Marcella with her first plan against you two." Beckett stopped pacing. "That's not enough. We need concrete proof linking those deposits to Marcella." "What about this?" Delaney pulled a document from Grace's files. Grace noted that Harrison's wife suddenly opened an art gallery in Charleston 3 years ago. A gallery that somehow acquired several valuable pieces that had mysteriously disappeared from my collection when Mother forced me to close my gallery. Sawyer moved closer to examine the document. "Can we prove the painting's provenance?" "Better than that." Delaney's hands shook slightly as she pulled up photos on her phone. "I documented every piece in my gallery obsessively, including small marks I made on the backs of frames, marks that would still be there if these are the same paintings." "If we can get access to that gallery tonight," Sarah began. "Already on it." Beckett was typing rapidly on his phone. "I know a judge who'll give us a warrant, one who hasn't been bought by Marcella." A knock at the door made everyone freeze. Beckett checked the security camera and quickly opened it, revealing a young intern from his firm, clutching a manila envelope. "This was just delivered to reception," the intern said breathlessly. "Marked urgent." Inside the envelope was a single photograph and a handwritten note. The photo showed Sawyer and Delaney entering Grace's house the night before. The note, in Marcella's elegant script, read, "Last chance. Walk away now, or everything burns." "She's bluffing," Sawyer said firmly, but Delaney had gone pale. "No, she's not." Delaney's voice was barely a whisper. "The last time she sent a note like this, my gallery's sprinkler system mysteriously malfunctioned overnight. Water damage destroyed everything I couldn't prove she took. The insurance company ruled it an accident." Sarah was already making calls. "I'm getting security posted at Grace's house. If that evidence is all we have..." "It's not." Delaney straightened, one hand protectively over her belly. "We have copies of everything, and more importantly, we have me. I'm done letting her threaten and manipulate the people I love." The room fell silent as she walked to the window, looking out over the Charleston skyline. "All these years, I thought running was protecting people. But Grace showed me the truth. Silence only protects the ones who abuse power." Sawyer joined her at the window, their reflections overlapping in the glass. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together." "The article is ready to go," Sarah announced. "Front page, digital edition, first thing in the morning. Once it breaks, Harrison won't be able to hide behind his reputation." "And I've confirmed the warrant," Beckett added. "We can search the gallery tonight. If those paintings are there, they will be," Delaney said with certainty. "Mother never gets rid of anything she takes. She keeps trophies." As the sun began to set over Charleston, casting long shadows, through the office windows, the team finalized their strategy for the next day's hearing. Each piece of evidence was carefully prepared, each argument rehearsed, each potential counter from Marcella anticipated. But it was more than just preparation they saw in each other's eyes. It was the quiet strength of people who had found something worth fighting for. Delaney's hand found Sawyer's, squeezing gently. Tomorrow would bring either victory or ruin, but tonight they had truth on their side, Grace's memory watching over them, and the unshakable certainty that love was worth any risk. As they left the office that evening, the setting sun painted the Charleston architecture in shades of gold and shadow. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Delaney said softly, "thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Sawyer's response was interrupted by his phone buzzing one final time, another message from his board. But this time, he didn't even look at it. Some choices, once made, rendered all others irrelevant, and he had made his choice the moment he saw her in that airport. The Charleston County Courthouse stood like a Roman temple in the morning light, its columns casting long shadows across the gathering crowd. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching skyward like metal flowers. Reporters clustered. At the entrance, cameras ready, hungry for the story that had exploded across the morning's headlines. Judicial corruption exposed. The truth behind the Harlow Maddox case. Inside the courthouse's marble halls, Delaney stood before a wall-length mirror in the women's restroom, adjusting her cream-colored blazer. The woman looking back at her seemed both familiar and strange, composed, determined, yet carrying the weight of years of suppressed truth. "Ready?" Sarah Chen appeared in the mirror behind her, holding up a copy of the morning's newspaper. The front page showed a damning photo of Judge Harrison leaving his wife's gallery late the previous night, face contorted in rage after discovering the police warrant. "They found them, didn't they?" Delaney asked quietly. "The paintings?" Sarah nodded. "Every single one, complete with your authentication marks. Harrison's wife is already talking to investigators, trying to save herself. She claims Marcella promised her a network of wealthy clients in exchange for laundering the art pieces." The courthouse corridors hummed with whispered conversations as they made their way to courtroom 3. Just outside the heavy wooden doors, they found Sawyer and Beckett in intense discussion. "The board vote?" Delaney asked, noting the tight set of Sawyer's jaw. "Doesn't matter anymore," he replied, taking her hand. "What matters is in there." They entered the courtroom together, the doors closing behind them with a sound like destiny settling into place. The room was already packed, the gallery filled with journalists and local legal observers. Sarah slipped into a seat near the front, her notebook ready, and there at the respondents' table sat Marcella Harlow. She wore a perfectly tailored grey suit, her silver hair swept into an elegant French twist. But something was different about her usual mask of control. Tiny cracks were beginning to show. Her fingers drummed an irregular rhythm on the table's surface, and her eyes darted between her daughter and the empty judge's bench. Judge Harrison was conspicuously absent. In his place, a stern-faced woman in her 60s took the bench, introducing herself as Judge Maria Ramirez. "Due to circumstances that have come to light this morning," she announced, "Judge Harrison has recused himself from this case. After reviewing the evidence submitted to this court, I have several concerns about the legitimacy of these proceedings." Marcella's attorney jumped to his feet, but Judge Ramirez cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Mr. Reynolds, in light of The criminal investigation now underway. You might want to consider your next words very carefully. The morning unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony. Beckett presented their evidence methodically. The financial records Grace had preserved, the security footage of Marcella's meetings with Harrison, the recovered paintings that proved the connection. But it was Delaney's testimony that held the courtroom spellbound. 3 years ago, she began, her voice clear and steady, I thought I lost everything because I wasn't strong enough to keep it. But I didn't lose it. It was taken from me. My gallery, my relationship, my first child. Her hand rested protectively over her current pregnancy, all orchestrated by someone who claimed to love me, but only loved the power she had over me. Marcella's facade cracked further. I did it to protect you, she burst out, rising from her seat, despite her attorney's attempt to quiet her. Everything I did was to keep you safe, to keep you from making mistakes. No mother. Delaney's voice was gentle but firm. You did it to keep me dependent. Every relationship you destroyed, every opportunity you sabotaged, it was never about protection. It was about control. Judge Ramirez's gavel cracked through the tension. Mrs. Harlow, sit down, or you will be held in contempt. And Mr. Reynolds, in light of your client's outburst and the evidence presented, I'm prepared to rule on this matter immediately. Oit. The courtroom held its breath as Judge Ramirez delivered her decision. The custody petition was not just denied, it was dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, she was referring the matter of judicial misconduct to the state's attorney's office for criminal investigation. But it was the judge's final words that would echo in newspaper headlines for weeks to come. This court has witnessed not just an abuse of power, but an abuse of love itself. Mrs. Harlow, your actions reveal a pattern of manipulation that this court finds deeply disturbing. You will have no legal right to interfere with your daughter's life or the life of her child. Any attempt to do so will result in immediate legal consequences. As the words settled over the courtroom, Delaney felt Sawyer's hand squeeze hers. They had done it. They had fought the storm and emerged victorious. But as she watched her mother being led away by her attorneys, Delaney felt no triumph, only a profound sadness for what could have been and a deeper appreciation for what still could be. Outside, the October sun had broken through Charleston's morning clouds, bathing the courthouse steps in warm light. As they emerged, Sawyer pulled Delaney close, protective yet gentle. They had won the battle, but they both knew that healing, real, lasting healing, was only just beginning. Grace's sunroom looked different in the warm afternoon light. Gone was the layer of dust that had settled over easels and canvases during months of abandonment. Fresh flowers filled ceramic vases, and the air smelled of linseed oil and possibility. Delaney stood before a blank canvas, paintbrush hovering uncertainly over its pristine surface. You don't have to do this today, Sawyer said softly from the doorway. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, looking more relaxed than he had in weeks, despite the morning's events. The emergency board meeting of his company had concluded an hour ago. After Sarah's exposé and the court's ruling, the tide of public opinion had shifted dramatically. The board's vote of no confidence had failed, though the damage to the company's stock would take time to repair. I do need to do this, Delaney replied, finally touching brush to canvas. Grace always said that art isn't just about creating beauty, it's about processing truth. And after today, there's a lot of truth to process. The first strokes were tentative, but gradually gained confidence. Colors began to emerge, deep blues, stormy grays, and underneath it all, threads of gold breaking through like sunshine. After rain. I got a call from the state attorney's office, Sawyer mentioned, moving to stand beside her. They want to interview us both next week about Mother's dealings with Harrison. They're building a strong case. Delaney's hand paused, mid-stroke. Will they arrest her? Most likely, the financial fraud alone. Beckett says she's looking at serious charges. He watched her face carefully. How do you feel about that? The painting before them was taking shape, an abstract landscape of chaos and light. I feel complicated, Delaney admitted. Part of me is still that little girl who just wanted her mother's approval, but another part, her free hand drifted to her belly, where their child grew stronger each day. Another part knows that sometimes love means protecting people from those who would hurt them, even if those people are family. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the soft sounds of brush against canvas and distant birdsong. From the garden, through the windows, they could see the old oak trees that had witnessed so much of Grace's life, and now would witness their new beginning. I've been thinking, Sawyer said finally, about what happens next. The media circus will die down eventually, but it might take time. And Chicago, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Chicago has a lot of memories, not all of them good. Delaney set down her brush, turning to face him fully. What are you suggesting? Grace left you this house for a reason. It's peaceful here, protected, the perfect place to heal and to start over. He gestured to the sunroom with its perfect light and space for creativity. You could paint again, really paint, not just to process pain, but to create beauty. And I've been thinking about scaling back anyway, running the company, remotely, focusing on what really matters. Sawyer Maddox, are you suggesting we move to Charleston? A smile played at the corners of her mouth. Leave behind your empire for a quiet life in the South. He stepped closer, his hands finding their way to her waist. I'm suggesting we build something new, something that can't be measured in stock prices or social influence, something real. The painting behind them was beginning to dry, its surface a testament to both turbulence and emergence, just like their story. Darkness and light, chaos and hope, all intertwined. Grace would have loved that idea, Delaney said softly. She always said this place had room for more love, more art, more life. She leaned into Sawyer's embrace, feeling the steady strength that had helped her weather the storm. But what about your business, your life in Chicago? My business will adapt. And as for my life, he pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. My life is wherever you are. The past few weeks have taught me what really matters, and it's not corner offices or board meetings. Through the open windows, a warm breeze carried the scent of jasmine from Grace's garden, the same garden where they had found the key that unlocked the truth, where they had begun to unravel years of manipulation and pain. Now it could be the garden where they planted new roots, grew new dreams. We'll need to renovate the nursery, Delaney mused, allowing herself to imagine it, and maybe turn the East Wing into a proper gallery space. Already thinking like an artist again, Sawyer smiled. That's the woman I fell in love with. She turned back to her painting, adding, another streak of gold breaking through the storm clouds. Not exactly the same woman, she corrected gently. Someone stronger, someone who knows her own worth. As the afternoon light painted shadows across the wooden floors, they began to plan. Not grand schemes of corporate expansion or social climbing, but simple precious things, nursery colors, gallery layouts, garden renovations, the kind of plans that build not empires but homes, the kind of dreams that can't be stolen or manipulated because they're built on truth and love instead of power and control. In the distance, church bells chimed the hour, their sound carrying across the Charleston Peninsula. A reminder that time was moving forward, leaving the shadows of the past behind, making room for new stories to unfold. The morning light filtered through centuries-old stained glass, casting colorful patterns across the wood floors of Grace's house. No, their house now. Delaney stood in what would soon be the nursery, directing movers as they carefully positioned an antique rocking chair. By the window, the chair had been Grace's once, its carved wood worn smooth by generations of loving hands. "The crib goes under the window," she instructed, one hand absently rubbing her growing belly. At 7 months pregnant, her body had fully embraced. The change is coming, just as their lives had embraced transformation. Sawyer appeared in the doorway, looking unusually casual in jeans and a light sweater. The past month had softened some of his corporate edges, though he still carried his phone like an appendage. "Board meeting just ended," he announced. "The new remote work arrangement is official. I'll only need to be in Chicago 1 week per month." Delaney crossed to him, fitting herself naturally into his embrace. "And they're really okay with their CEO running things from Charleston?" "They're more than okay. Our stock has actually stabilized since the announcement." He chuckled softly. "Apparently, the public likes the narrative of the ruthless businessman choosing love and family over power." Sarah's article about our fresh start in Charleston did wonders for the company's image. A noise from downstairs interrupted them. Voices in the foyer, the sound of equipment being moved. "That'll be the gallery installation team," Delaney said, excitement coloring her voice. "The lighting system for the East Wing is being set up today." They made their way downstairs, where professional art handlers were carefully unpacking crates. These weren't the paintings that had been recovered from Harrison's wife's gallery. Those were still being held as evidence in the ongoing criminal investigation. These were new pieces, created by local Charleston artists that Delaney had connected with over the past weeks. "Mrs. Chen's article really helped with this too," Delaney remarked, watching as a particularly striking landscape was unwrapped. "Once the truth about what happened to my Chicago gallery came out, artists started reaching out. They remembered me, wanted to work with me again." Sarah Chen's follow-up piece had indeed been instrumental in reshaping public perception. Rather than focusing on the scandal, she had written about resilience, about the power of truth to overcome manipulation, about the importance of second chances. The article had turned Delaney and Sawyer's story into something inspirational rather than sensational. "Speaking of Sarah," Sawyer said, checking his phone, "she sent an update about the investigation. Marcella's trial date is set for next spring. The prosecutor is confident. They've found evidence of similar manipulation in 3 other cases." Delaney absorbed this news quietly, her expression thoughtful. "I got a letter from her yesterday," she admitted, "from the treatment facility. After her arrest, Marcella had opted for a voluntary stay at a mental health facility, her attorneys likely hoping it would help her case." "Do you want to talk about it?" Sawyer asked gently. "She apologized in her way, said she never meant to cause harm, that she only wanted to protect me." Delaney moved to the window, watching as delivery trucks came and went in the circular driveway. The therapist who co-signed the letter said she's beginning to understand the difference between love and control. "It's a start, I suppose." Sawyer joined her at the window, his presence steady and grounding. "You don't owe her forgiveness." "I know. But maybe understanding is enough for now." She turned to face the room again, where the gallery was slowly taking shape. "Grace taught me that healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means building something new from what remains." The afternoon passed in a blur of activity. By sunset, the first floor of the East Wing had been transformed. Track lighting highlighted empty walls, waiting to be filled with art. The original hardwood floors gleamed, freshly restored to their antebellum glory. In one corner, a small plaque waited to be mounted. "Grace's Gallery at Harlow House." The installation team packed up for the day. Beckett called with updates about the business transition. Everything was proceeding smoothly. The Chicago office would handle day-to-day operations, with Sawyer maintaining executive oversight through video conferences and monthly visits. It was a new model of leadership for the company, one that prioritized balance over traditional corporate presence. Later, as they sat on the veranda watching the sun set over the garden, Delaney felt the baby kick. "Strong little one," she smiled, guiding Sawyer's hand to feel it, just like his grandmother. "Grace would have loved being a grandmother," Sawyer said softly. "She will be," Delaney replied with certainty. "Maybe not in person, but in all the ways that matter. In the gallery that bears her name, in the house she made a home, in the strength she taught me to find in myself." She looked around at the sprawling property, at the life they were building from the ashes of the old. Everything good in our new beginning came from her belief in love's power to heal. A cool evening breeze stirred the Spanish moss in the autumn oak trees, carrying with it the salt-tinged air from the harbor. In the distance, a ship's horn sounded, a reminder that even as they put down roots here, the world continued to move and change around them. "The gallery opening is in 2 weeks," Delaney mused, her voice carrying a mix of excitement and nervous energy. "Are you sure you don't mind having it here, opening our home to the public like this?" Sawyer smiled, remembering the corporate parties and networking events that had once filled his calendar. "This is different," he said. "This isn't about power or influence. It's about creating something meaningful, something that honors both Grace's memory and your vision." As night settled over Charleston, lights began to twinkle on in neighboring houses. Their home, because that's what it had become, glowed warmly from within, full of promise and possibility. Tomorrow would bring more changes, more steps forward in their new life. But for now, they sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one over their reclaimed piece of paradise. The evening air hummed with anticipation as string lights twinkled in the ancient oak trees surrounding Harlow House. Valets guided cars along the circular drive, while caterers put final touches on elegant hors d'oeuvre displays. In the newly renovated East Wing, Delaney stood before a large canvas, her first completed work since returning to painting. The piece dominated the central wall of the gallery, impossible to miss upon entering. Unlike her previous works, which had often featured bold colors and dramatic contrasts, this painting spoke in subtler tones. Layers of blues and grays swirled through the composition like storm clouds, but golden light seemed to emerge from within the canvas itself, breaking through the darkness in delicate, persistent threads. "It's perfect," Sawyer said softly, coming to stand beside her. He looked distinguished in a charcoal suit, though his tie was slightly loosened, a small rebellion against his former corporate rigidity. "It's us," Delaney replied, smoothing her flowing midnight blue gown over her prominent belly. "The storm, the struggle, the light breaking through, everything we've been through to get here." The sound of cars arriving drew their attention. Through the gallery's tall windows, they could see Charleston's art community beginning to arrive. Collectors, critics, fellow artists. But mixed among them were faces from their recent battles. Sarah Chen, notebook in hand as always. Beckett, who had flown in from Chicago for the occasion. Even a few board members who had supported Sawyer through the transition. "Ready?" Sawyer asked, offering his arm. Delaney took a deep breath, touching the small pendant at her neck, a gift from Grace that had been found among her papers, waiting for the right moment. "Ready?" The gallery filled quickly, the crowd's murmur echoing off restored hardwood, floors and pristine walls. Delaney moved through the space with natural grace, discussing pieces with guests, sharing her vision for the gallery's future. She had curated the opening exhibition carefully, featuring both established Charleston artists and emerging talents who reminded her of herself at the start of her career. "This is extraordinary," Sarah Chen commented, pausing before a series of photographs showing the house's renovation. "You've managed to preserve the historical character while creating something completely modern." "Grace would have loved it," Delaney smiled. "She always said this house needed more art, more life." The evening flowed smoothly until a slight commotion at the entrance caught their attention. Beckett appeared at Sawyer's side, speaking in low tones. "Marcella's attorney is here, says he has something for Delaney. I can have him removed." "No," Delaney said firmly, overhearing. "This is a night for new beginnings. Let him approach." The attorney, a younger man who hadn't been part of the original case, made his way through the crowd. He carried a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. "Mrs. Harlow asked me to deliver this personally," he explained, handing it to Delaney. "She wanted you to have it tonight." With steady hands, Delaney unwrapped the package. Inside was a small, worn sketchbook, her first, from when she was 12 years old. She had thought it lost decades ago. "She kept it all these years," the attorney said softly. She said it was time for it to come home." Tucked inside the sketchbook was a note in Marcella's elegant handwriting. "I'm learning that love means letting go. That true strength isn't in controlling, but in supporting growth. The woman you've become. She's everything I should have helped you be, instead of trying to make you who I thought you should be. I'm sorry. Mother." Delaney closed the sketchbook carefully, holding it close. Sawyer's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "Would you like me to pass along a message?" the attorney asked. "Yes," Delaney said after a moment. Tell her the gallery will always have space for healing when she's ready." As the attorney left, Sarah approached with a subtle nod toward the growing crowd. It was time for the official opening speech. Delaney moved to the center of the room, Sawyer at her side, facing their gathered guests. "Welcome to Grace's gallery at Harlow House," she began, her voice clear and strong. "This space represents many things, a tribute to a remarkable woman who showed me the true meaning of unconditional love, a celebration of artistic vision, and proof that sometimes the most beautiful things can emerge from life's storms." She gestured to her central painting. "Art, like love, isn't about perfection. It's about truth, about finding light in darkness, growth in challenge, strength in vulnerability. This gallery isn't just a space for displaying art. It's a space for nurturing new voices, for encouraging bold visions, for celebrating the courage it takes to create something genuine." Looking out at the faces before her, friends and strangers, allies and art lovers, Delaney felt the baby move, as if adding its own emphasis to her words. "Every piece here tells a story of resilience, of transformation, of hope, and this is just the beginning." The crowd applauded warmly, and as servers began circulating with champagne flutes and sparkling cider, the atmosphere shifted from formal to celebratory. Discussions of art and possibility filled the air, punctuated by laughter and exclamations of delight as guests discovered new pieces. Later, as the evening wound down, Delaney and Sawyer found a quiet moment in Grace's sunroom, now converted into a private viewing space for special collections. The sketchbook sat between them, a bridge between past and present. "You know," Sawyer said thoughtfully, "when I saw you in that airport, I thought I was saving you. But really, you saved both of us." Delaney leaned against him, watching the gallery lights reflect off the garden's dewdrops like countless stars. "We saved each other, and now we build," he finished, his hand resting protectively over their growing child. One day at a time. December brought a rare dusting of snow to Charleston, transforming Grace's garden into a winter wonderland. Delaney stood at the nursery window, one hand pressed against the cool glass, the other cradling her now prominent belly. The room had come together beautifully, soft cream walls adorned with gentle watercolors of woodland creatures she'd painted. Herself, the antique rocking chair dressed with handmade quilts and floating shelves filled with children's books, many from Grace's personal collection. "The doctor called," Sawyer announced, entering the room with 2 mugs of herbal tea. "Everything looks perfect. 2 more weeks until we meet our little one." Delaney accepted the tea gratefully, inhaling its soothing aroma. "I found something. Today," she said, gesturing to a small box on the window seat. "I was going through the last of Grace's papers in the study." Sawyer sat beside the box, carefully lifting its lid. Inside lay a collection of carefully preserved baby clothes, yellowed with age, but still beautifully made. Beneath them was a note in Grace's familiar handwriting. "For the next generation of dreamers in this house." "She knew," Delaney said softly, easing herself into the rocking chair. "Somehow she knew this room would be a nursery again. She kept everything ready, waiting." The past months had settled into a rhythm they both cherished. Sawyer's monthly trips to Chicago had become shorter as his remote leadership style proved, increasingly effective. The gallery had flourished, becoming a respected venue for both established and emerging artists. And their home had grown into exactly what Grace had always envisioned, a place of creativity, love, and new beginnings. "Beckett sent over the final paperwork this morning," Sawyer mentioned, carefully refolding a tiny christening gown. "The trust for the baby is set up, completely separate from both our assets. No one can ever use money to control his future." The decision to create an independent trust had been one of their first acts after the gallery opening. They had both seen how wealth could be wielded as a weapon, and they were determined their child would never face such manipulation. "I got another letter from Mother," Delaney said after a moment. "Her therapy is progressing. She's started painting too, part of her treatment program." A small smile touched her lips. "She's terrible at it, apparently, but she says it's helping her understand me better." Sawyer moved to stand, behind the rocking chair, his hands gently massaging her shoulders. "And how do you feel about that?" "Hopeful, I think. Not for an immediate reconciliation, but..." She touched one of the baby clothes in the box. "Maybe by the time our son is old enough to ask about his grandmother, she'll be someone he can safely know." The winter sun emerged from behind clouds, making the snow crystals glitter. In the garden below, they could see the preparations for spring already taking shape. Bulbs waiting beneath the frost, grapevines carefully pruned, new beds marked out for Grace's beloved roses. "Sarah's article about the gallery's success came out in today's paper," Sawyer said, reaching for his tablet. "She included that quote you gave her about art being a form of redemption." Delaney hummed, rocking gently. "Did she include the part about the youth program?" The gallery's newest initiative was particularly close to Delaney's heart, a program offering free art classes to local children with a special focus on those dealing with family trauma. It was their way of transforming pain into purpose, of ensuring that other young people would have the creative outlet Delaney had once found in art. Front and center, Sawyer confirmed, along with that beautiful photo of the kids' first exhibition. A sharp kick from the baby made Delaney laugh. Someone's eager to join the art world already. Speaking of which, Sawyer retrieved a wrapped package from behind the door. "I was going to save this for Christmas, but inside was a custom-made mobile for the crib, delicate glass shapes in blues and golds that caught the light, creating patterns reminiscent of Delaney's paintings. Tiny crystals sent rainbow reflections dancing across the nursery walls. "It's perfect," she whispered, watching the pieces move gently in the air. "Like captured light." "That's what you do, you know," Sawyer said softly, kneeling beside her chair. "You capture light in your art, in this home, in everything you touch. Even during the darkest times, you never lost that ability." Delaney's hand found his, guiding, it to where their son was moving. We all have light inside us. Sometimes we just need someone to help us remember it's there. The afternoon drifted by peacefully as they finished organizing the nursery. Each item they placed felt like another stitch in the tapestry of their future. A future built on truth, strengthened by trials and illuminated by love. As twilight approached, bringing with it another gentle snowfall, Delaney returned to the window. The garden below was transforming again, snow filling in the day's footprints, creating a fresh canvas for tomorrow. It was a reminder that life was constantly renewing itself, that each day brought opportunities for new beauty to emerge. 2 weeks, she murmured, watching the snow fall. 2 weeks until our next great adventure begins. Sawyer wrapped his arms around her from behind, and together they stood in companionable silence, watching winter's quiet magic unfold. In the peaceful nursery, surrounded by reminders of the past and promises of the future, they felt the fullness of their journey, not just from loss to love, but from darkness to light, from control to freedom, from fear to faith. The baby kicked again, strong and sure, as if adding his own punctuation to their thoughts. Soon he would join them in this house of art and healing, of history and hope. And when he did, he would find himself surrounded by the kind of love that strengthens rather than confines, the kind of love that sets you free to become exactly who you're meant to be. The first light of dawn was just breaking over Charleston when Delaney felt the initial contractions. She stood in Grace's sunroom, watching the sky turn from indigo to pale rose, one hand pressed against the cool glass, while the other supported her back. The garden outside was still draped in winter's quiet, a thin layer of frost coating the dormant roses. "It's time," she said softly, and Sawyer, who hadn't left her side since her first restless stirring in the night, was already reaching for the carefully packed hospital bag. The drive to the hospital was surreal, Charleston slowly awakening around them, streets empty except for early morning joggers and delivery trucks. Delaney watched the familiar landmarks pass, the gallery with its darkened windows, the cafe, where they often had breakfast, the park where they'd spent countless afternoons planning their future. At Medical University of South Carolina, everything moved with practiced efficiency. Their birth plan was reviewed, their preferences noted, their room prepared with the same attention to detail that had marked every aspect of their journey together. "Remember," Delaney said between contractions, gripping Sawyer's hand. "His middle name, James, after Grace's father," Sawyer finished, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. "Cassian James Maddox." The labor progressed steadily through the morning and into the afternoon. Delaney moved between positions with determination, drawing on the same strength that had helped her reclaim her life. Sawyer remained a constant presence, supporting, encouraging. His corporate efficiency transformed into focused dedication to her comfort. Outside their room, life went on. Sarah Chen sent a text wishing them well. Beckett called from Chicago with news about the company's latest successful quarter, but within their space, time seemed to move differently, measured only by contractions and quiet moments of preparation. "Tell me again," Delaney requested during a brief respite, "about the first time you saw me." Sawyer smiled, continuing their ritual of sharing memories to pass the time. "You were giving a lecture at the Art Institute, The Economics of Beauty, analyzing the intersection of art and commerce. You were brilliant, challenging every preconception I had about the art world. I couldn't take my eyes off you. And I thought you were just another businessman who wanted to treat art like a commodity," she laughed, then tensed as another contraction began. "Instead, you taught me that true value can't be measured in dollars," he finished, supporting her through the wave of pain. As afternoon faded into evening, the moment they had been waiting for arrived. With one final, powerful effort, Delaney brought their son into the world. The room filled with his first strong cry, a sound of new beginnings, of promises fulfilled. "Hello, Cassian," Delaney whispered as he was placed on her chest, her voice full of wonder. "We've been waiting so long to meet you." Sawyer's hand trembled slightly as he touched his son's tiny fingers. In that moment, all the battles they had fought, all the pain they had overcome, crystallized into perfect clarity. This was what they had been fighting for, not just their love, but the chance to create something new from it, something untouched by the shadows of the past. Cassian's eyes, when they opened briefly, were a deep blue-gray like storm clouds parting. His tiny features seemed to hold echoes of both of them, but there was something else there too, something uniquely his own, a promise of who he might become. As night fell over Charleston, their room became a peaceful sanctuary. Sawyer sat beside the bed, holding Cassian while Delaney rested. Through the window, they could see the lights of the city twinkling like earthbound stars. "He's perfect," Sawyer murmured, watching their son sleep. "Absolutely perfect." "Grace knew," Delaney said softly, reaching out to touch Cassian's cheek. "That's why she left us the house, the baby clothes, everything. She knew love would find its way home." In that quiet moment, surrounded by the gentle beeping of monitors and the soft sounds of their newborn's breathing, they felt the full circle of their journey. From the chaos of that airport encounter to this peaceful hospital room, they had transformed loss into love, pain into purpose, fear into family. Later that night, as Delaney fed Cassian for the first time, Sawyer received a small package from the evening mail delivery. Inside was a tiny handmade blanket in the softest shade of blue, accompanied by a note in Marcella's handwriting, "For Cassian, made with love and hope for his future. When he's old enough to ask, tell him his grandmother is learning that love grows best in freedom. M." Delaney read the note over Sawyer's shoulder, her free hand gently stroking Cassian's dark hair. "Tomorrow," she said thoughtfully. "Tomorrow we'll decide about the blanket. But tonight is just for us." Sawyer agreed, carefully setting the package aside. Outside their window, Charleston slept under a canopy of stars. In homes across the city, Grace's gallery displayed local artists' work. The youth art program prepared for its spring semester, and life continued its steady flow. But here in this room, time stood still as three people who had been brought together by love's persistent light began their next great adventure. Spring came early to Charleston that year, coaxing Grace's roses into bloom weeks ahead of schedule. In the garden of Harlow House, 6-month-old Cassian lay on a blanket beneath the shade of ancient oak trees, reaching for the dancing patterns of light and shadow that filtered through the leaves above. Delaney sat beside him, sketchbook in hand, capturing his expressions of wonder as he discovered the world around him. The blanket they sat on was the one Marcella had sent, a choice made after many long conversations and careful consideration. It represented not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement of the possibility of change, of growth, of healing across generations. The board meeting went well, Sawyer called from the veranda, ending a video call with Chicago. "They're impressed with the new quarterly numbers. Turns out a CEO who prioritizes family and balance sets a pretty good example for company culture." He joined them on the blanket, and Cassian's face lit up with a gummy smile at his father's appearance. The baby had his mother's honey-colored hair and his father's steel blue eyes, but his laugh was entirely his own, a sound of pure joy that seemed to bubble up from some endless spring of happiness. "Sarah's piece about the youth art program is running tomorrow," Delaney mentioned, adding another sketch to her growing collection. "She interviewed some of the children. Their stories—" She paused, watching Cassian grab at a fallen flower petal. "They remind me why we started this. The gallery had evolved beyond their initial vision, becoming a sanctuary for artistic expression and healing. Each week, children who had faced their own battles with family trauma found refuge in its light-filled spaces, discovering their voices through paint and clay and color. Their artwork lined a special corridor, the Future Masters Gallery, their names displayed with the same respect as any established artist. "Did you see the latest letter?" Sawyer asked gently, knowing Delaney would understand which letter he meant. She nodded, adding soft shading to her sketch. "Mother's therapist says she's making real progress. She's started mentoring other patients in the art therapy program, teaching them that creativity doesn't need to be perfect to be valuable." A small smile touched her lips. "It took her 60 years, but she's finally learning what Grace tried to teach me at 16. Cassian rolled onto his stomach, pushing himself up to look at a curious butterfly that had landed nearby. His movements were getting stronger every day, his personality emerging in small but distinct ways. He had his mother's artistic fascination with light and color, and his father's quiet determination when faced with a challenge. "The renovation plans for the West Wing are ready," Sawyer said, helping Cassian sit up. "The Children's Art Center should be open by fall." They had decided to expand the youth program, converting the unused portion of the house into dedicated studio spaces and classrooms. It would be named the Grace James Memorial Art Center, a place where creativity and healing could intertwine, just as they had in their own story. "I finished the piece for the center's entrance today," Delaney said. "Would you like to see it?" In Grace's sunroom, now Delaney's primary studio, a large canvas dominated the far wall. Unlike her previous work about storms and struggle, this painting exploded with color and light. Children's silhouettes danced through spaces filled with swirling patterns, their forms gradually transforming into birds taking flight. And there, woven subtly through the composition, were symbols of their journey. A airport terminal's harsh fluorescent lights softened by distance, a judge's gavel transformed into a flower, a garden gate opening onto infinite possibility. "It's about transformation," Delaney explained, lifting Cassian so he could see the colors. He reached out, trying to catch the painted light with his tiny hands. "About how pain can become purpose, fear can become freedom, and endings can become beginnings." Sawyer wrapped his arms around them both, breathing in the mingled scents of paint, baby powder, and spring roses drifting through the open windows. "Grace would have loved it." "She does love it," Delaney corrected gently. "Every time a child finds their voice here, every time someone discovers their own strength through art, every time love wins over fear, that's Grace's legacy living on." The afternoon light painted everything in shades of gold, reminding Delaney of that first painting she'd created after their reunion, the one where light broke through storm clouds. But now she understood something she hadn't then. The light hadn't broken through the darkness. It had been there all along, waiting to be revealed. Later, as day faded into evening, they sat in Grace's garden while Cassian slept peacefully in his father's arms. The gallery lights cast a warm glow through the windows of Harlow House, and somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed the hour. "Sometimes," Delaney said softly, "I think about that day in the airport. How close we came to missing each other. How many things had to align for us to have this second chance." "Not chance," Sawyer replied, looking down at their sleeping son. "Grace used to say that love leaves signs for us to follow if we're brave enough to see them." Delaney reached out to touch Cassian's cheek, marveling at his perfect peace. In him, she saw all the possibilities of love freely given, of strength born from gentleness, of a future unbound by the chains of the past. He would grow up surrounded by art and healing, by truth and transformation, by the kind of love that builds rather than binds. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, The three of them sat together in the garden where their story had begun to turn. Around them, Grace's roses released their evening fragrance, their blooms silvered by starlight. And in that moment, in the space between one breath and the next, they felt the perfect rightness of their journey, not just the destination, but every step that had led them here. For this was how love truly won, not in grand gestures or dramatic battles, but in quiet moments of choice and change. In children, sleeping peacefully in their father's arms, in art that spoke truth to pain, in gardens that bloomed season after season, offering beauty to anyone brave enough to nurture it, and in all the days that stretched before them, full of promise and possibility, they would continue to choose love, to choose healing, to choose each other. For that was the greatest truth they had learned, that love, real love, was not a cage to contain us, but wings to help us soar.